Hi everyone, it's Patricia Warby from Alchemy Therapies, and today I want to talk about something that this channel has been promoting for, well, quite a number of years. It turns out I've been a member of YouTube now for 10 years, and I've had this channel for just over two and a half, I think. Next week, I'll be doing a quick summary and a kind of celebration of what I've achieved in those two and a half years, because we really are at a milestone on the channel. But today, I want to focus on something that's termed decentralized medicine. Now, that may not be a term you've come across. You may have done, depends what other channels you follow on YouTube. But I think it's been borrowed from finance, from this movement we're seeing towards people taking back control of their own finances and creating new forms of wealth. And so decentralized finance, which is highly linked to the crypto revolution and the blockchain, is actually something I've been following for the last probably about the same time, maybe even longer, 3 or 4 years. And I have a separate channel devoted to that. But here, I think the idea of decentralized medicine is all about taking back control of your health away from the institutions that previously we would have trusted to ensure the best possible case of treatment for us. Now, what I'm seeing increasingly with the clients I'm working with is that they're being left really without hope and without a solution, because the vast majority of people that I work with suffer from chronic, long-standing conditions like CFSME, like anxiety, long COVID, some autoimmune conditions. And these seem to be not being dealt with very well by conventional medicine, because I think it's tied to the mast of the interventionist policy of kind of testing and then drug treatment. Those are the two arms that really are available to your primary health caregiver, and indeed even your secondary health provider. So acute medicine has had huge advances in the last 30 or 40 years. Chronic medicine, less so, I think. And many people end up on multiple medications without hope, without relief, and just thinking that there's nothing more that can be done for them because their doctors run out of options. And so I think anything which gives people hope, which says that actually you can take back a degree of control over what's happening. That's not to say that's a substitute for good medical advice, of course, but understanding that there are things you can do to help support your body, and ideally work in conjunction with an amenable, integrative doctor. Now, luckily, this week I watched a wonderful video, I'll include it in the show notes below, with Dr. Boon Lim, who is a cardiologist. He's also a cardiac physiologist, which is an interesting definition. It means you study what happens in the cardiac tissue, about things that you can do, and about heart connection, about that the heart is more than a pump, and all the things that it does, and how it's involved in baroreceptors, vagal innervation. The interaction with the autonomic nervous system is massive. And in particular, he was looking at some measurements called HRV, or heart rate variability. And that's been something of interest to me for a long time, since I discovered it about 4 or 5 years ago and started to experiment myself and find out my own HRV. Now, what HRV is the interbeat variation. So your standard heartbeat, the RS curve, as it's called, is a huge spike and then a little downward one. And the distance between the two spikes is the interval. And if you plot that, you'll find that it isn't regular. It isn't like a metronome, bum, bum, bum. It's not like that at all. Actually, it speeds up when you breathe in because of the baroreceptors in the nerves supplying your heart, which are linked to your lungs as well and know about the pressure. So it speeds up when you breathe in, and it slows down a little when you breathe out. At least it should do, and in a nice sinuous curve if you plot it. And so Dr. Boon Lim was talking about that, and how he now routinely tests people for their HRV, which is very unusual. Most medical practitioners don't use it. They may know about it. Very few actually do know about it, but it's one of the most important measures of your autonomic health. the balance between the fight and flight sympathetic mechanism and the rest and digest or parasympathetic mechanism, which, innervates your heart and tells the heart where you are in the world, how you're feeling, and whether you need to beat faster or less. And of course, it innervates all your other organs as well. So the heart, I guess, is a proxy for everything else. If your heart is being innervated in a controlled, balanced way, then hopefully so will the rest of your organs. So it's a lovely measure of internal nervous system balance, which is all about your health. And he was showing a device online that you can use to kind of track your HRV and thus train your HRV, because it's all about how you breathe. Now, as I'm talking here, because I'm talking, my HRV will be very, very irregular because I'm not breathing properly because I'm talking. And so just taking a breath with me now and allowing a breath in through the nose, and if necessary to calm everything down, a breath out through the mouth is a good idea. Even having a gap between the in-breath and the out-breath, which we call box breathing. So there's a gap while you wait, and then you breathe out, and then there's another gap, and then you breathe in. Is actually, if you had a readout now, you'd start to see that it starts to regulate. And so HRV is a lovely measure, but it's not the only thing. Finding out what kinds of stresses people are under, how they live their lives. Do you access the sun? Sunlight is a nutrient. Now, most of us think of nutrients as foods. And indeed, if we're suffering from any form of chronic condition, we'll have no doubt thought about going to see a nutritionist or a dietitian to get some advice on what we could do to change our diets, to kind of maybe take some supplements to benefit our system and maybe start things moving in the right direction. But the sad truth is that for people who have autonomic dysfunction, also called dysautonomia, just bunging a load of supplements into your system can actually cause more harm than good, because the system is running at a very low ebb, and so your digestion won't be working properly, and therefore all you're having to do is eliminate more, detoxify, and the supplementation actually becomes another thing that your body has to take on board. And so, in fact, that was confirmed by a recent Cochrane study, which showed that only 7% of people with chronic fatigue syndrome, otherwise known as CFS-ME, actually benefited from supplementation. They much more likely to benefit from autonomic regulation, from things that actually help you rebalance your brain or your autonomic nervous system. Vagal toning, for instance, breathing. As I said, light stimulation. Now, getting daylight, I've done another recording on that more recently. If you think of light as a nutrient rather than it's just electromagnetic waves, well, it is, but it's also a nutrient for the body. If you think about it, we've evolved in sunlight, we are adapted to it. Our system uses the energy from sunlight, in particular infrared, to help promote energy production. UV light is also possible to use, and particularly we know that UVB is used to create vitamin D in the skin, and we need it. We need daylight every day if possible, and particularly in the morning. And how we absorb it is usually through the skin. Infrared tends to penetrate a lot further than UV because it's a lower wavelength. But also through the eyes, so obviously you don't want to stare into full sunlight if it's the middle of the day and you're in a hot climate, but avoiding sunglasses, certainly at the low points, morning and evening, and allowing daylight to penetrate your eyes is really key. Even on an overcast day, the difference in irradiance, the difference in the light strength between indoors and outdoors is huge. So indoors, in a well-lit room, you might get 70 to 90 lux. That's the measurement term, lux. Outdoors, even on an overcast day, you're likely to get around about 1,000 lux. On a bright day, it can go up to tens of thousands. Okay, so it's a really important thing to allow sunlight into the eyes and that will help your eye health. A lot of macular degeneration, we know, is linked to lack of light. Even brain disorders like Parkinson's disease, there's a huge amount of evidence now that light is very helpful. And if you can't get natural daylight, because maybe like me, you live in a northern climate and it's cold at this time of year, then supplementing with infrared light and or firelight at night, even if you happen to have a wood burning stove, although it has a glass front, infrared light is able to be emitted from there. And so just looking at a fire is really important. It's actually the near infrared that you get from there. So that's the slightly shorter wavelength version of infrared, because there's near and far infrared. So light levels really important. Get daylight every day. Do your exercise outdoors if you can. You know, if you're very fond of the gym, make sure there's daylight if possible. If you have a setup at home, take it outside if you can. Even better, go running or walking outdoors and actually get the benefit of fresh air as well. The other thing to note is sound. Sound is also an input that the brain can use to kind of actually adjust itself. It's a form of synchronization, if you like, or coherence, we call it, where what comes into the ears is actually perceived in the brain as a resonant frequency. And if you vary the frequency between each ear, the brain has to make up the difference and creates a new brainwave state from that. And this is called binaural beats, because actually the perception is that you hear a sort of, the difference is a beat that you can hear over and above the music or whatever is present in the sound recording. But underneath, what it's effectively doing is entraining your brain to a different rhythm, which hopefully will bring down the fight and flight system, which is in the brain. It's very much linked with a beta brainwave, which is a very high frequency. And you want to bring that down so that you can actually feel a bit more relaxed. And that's what we call the flow state, alpha rhythm, even down to a delta, which is more like sleep. So just finding ways in which you can vary the inputs in your system to change the output of your nervous system and therefore what you're able to achieve. A lot of people with long COVID, it seems, have dysautonomia, and that's something that I discovered this week when I watched a brilliant video with Dr Boon Lim, which I'll include down below, talking about dysautonomia and how people with long COVID tended to be people who are quite stressed, and their systems are quite stressed, and so they find it very, very difficult to recover. So that's three of the inputs. Another input, as I've mentioned, HRV, which is more visual. You're watching this output and you're adjusting your breathing to overlay this new rhythm. But I also use something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which usually involves a bilateral stimulus of vision. The common form is just asking somebody to follow my fingers left to right, but it can also be done usually on the legs, but for purposes of these, I'm going to tap either side, so that could be touch. As long as it's either side, and your brain has to kind of interpret that. And that can be really good for rebalancing sense memory. So things that happened to you that overwhelmed you, that haven't disappeared, they're still in your system, what we would now call trauma, can actually be re-evoked and lit up and rebalanced, i.e. dealt with, reprocessed. Hence EMDR has the R in it, reprocessing, so that it's over as far as your autonomic nervous system is concerned. So that I would also include as a stimulus for maybe dealing with issues that maybe have been unprocessed from your childhood. So it's definitely an input, and it takes back the idea that you need experts to help you heal. Now, it's very important to be advised by the right people, of course, and I'm not saying there's no use case for conventional medicine, because there clearly is, and there are amazing people doing amazing things in this arena. as Dr. Boon Lim actually epitomizes, because he's both a wonderful clinician and also somebody who's really interested in working a little bit deeper with people and understanding the emotional and psychological inputs as well. So there are people out there who are in the centralized system. That's hospitals, clinics, doctors' surgeries. It also includes the research community, in my view, and the regulatory bodies. That's the whole centralized system. But there are people there who are subtly introducing these new ideas and helping people to gain more understanding and awareness of their system, and therefore actually give them the tools they need to help them heal. And I think when this is done really properly, you become a team working alongside your consultant or your doctor. So they're your advocate, but they're not your healer. The healer is you. Always. The healing comes from within, making certain shifts in the autonomic nervous system, your sense of openness, your sense of self, who you individually believe yourself to be and what your options are. This is the healing journey. It's not just about fixing the problem. So I am a thoroughly converted person. I mean, I started in life absolutely part of the centralized system. I studied in Hammersmith Hospital in London in research. That was my first graduate position, which was very exciting to see how research was promoted. But I very quickly, the rose-tinted glasses fell away, and I did start to see how it actually works. Is all about publish or die. You know, it's definitely a competitive game. And if you don't publish, you're pretty much nobody, and you will either drop away or you'll find yourself in a very minor position in that system. So make no mistake about it, great things are done. I certainly, in the arena of acute medicine, I know where I'd rather be, and that's in the centralized system. It's just in more chronic long-term conditions like chronic fatigue, like chronic anxiety, like long COVID, I would be wanting to investigate these sort of more psychosensory, I'd like to say, inputs. So sound, sight, touch, to kind of change the input to alter that output. And so I think decentralization is the way for, I guess, personalized to you, of course. It's the buzzword for now. And I'm very excited to say I'll be doing a talk for the same collective that Dr. Boon Lim talked to, who presented to this week. We believe, I think it's going to be at the end of March. The date hasn't been confirmed, but I will obviously announce that when I know. And I'm going to be talking more about quantum biology and light, but I just wanted you to understand that there are new ways of doing things. And perhaps also it's borrowing a little from the old ways that we've kind of lost, treating you as an individual. And if that sounds interesting to you and you'd like to come and explore that with me, you can find me on alchemytherapies.co.uk. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.